Okay, so let's start. So good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining this session this evening. Let me quickly introduce our host for today. So we have Surya with us. Surya Narayan Saha is going to be our host, and he's the one who's going to conduct our webinar for today. All right. So Surya, are you there?
Hi, Prashant.
All right. So can't see you, Surya. All right. Fantastic. Hi, Surya.
Hi, Prashant.
Okay. All right. A small background about our host for today. So, Surya is, like you all know, our expert on blockchain. So, we'll have to give you a small background about who he is and what he's done, and tell you some of his accomplishments. So, let me start off by saying he holds a master's degree on business excellence from University of Warwick in the UK. And after completion of his education, he got into the finance and the insurance sector. So with his expertise in the insurance and finance sector, he's also gone deep into the blockchain and different aspects of fintech there. So apart from all this in the industry that he's done, he's also authored a book called The Digital Choices, which focuses on digital transformation and how companies can leverage it and use that to design their strategy. Right? Apart from that, he is also a board member of the Hope Foundation in Ireland, and he is currently pursuing his PhD in enterprise blockchain. So we're really fortunate to have Surya with us, and he's going to impart a lot of knowledge on blockchain and how it can be leveraged to transform our economy. All right, so I hope it's going to be a wonderful session, and everybody who's in this session are going to get a lot from it. All right, so yeah, Surya, over to you.
Thanks, Prashant. Thanks, Career Stepladder team for having me. Of course, indeed, it's a pleasure to be here and discuss this unbelievable transformation that we are going to face in the coming days through blockchain. So, as I see um, our participants, some of them have already joined, and of course, we will see more joining the session today. It'll be good to have a little background of where they come from, where they work, what their interests are, and why do they want to learn blockchain. Perhaps we can make this session a little more interactive if they can just type in something in the chat box or just also, you know, unmute themselves and if that's allowed, Prashant.
They can do that, Surya. They can unmute and they can speak.
Yep. So we have Arvind, we have Bob, we have Rahul, we have Sean. Not sure who is the concerned person named as Black Gold.
Good afternoon, everybody. Black Gold.
Hi, good afternoon. Pierre would just love to understand a bit more on everyone's background and what your interest on blockchain. So it will be easier for us also, to go ahead.
I have some ideas that I want to bring to what I think the blockchain is supposed to be. I think that some ideas that I had for some other platforms, the blockchain are going to make that quite. The blockchain is going to be useful for what I want to bring to it. The only true knowledge I have is I started getting involved with cryptocurrency, DeFi, things like that, staking. But I understand that blockchain has quite a few more applications. And I said, let me see. People are talking. Let's find out what's going on. So I wanted to see what you all were talking about.
Right, excellent. Of course, yeah. We all were, at some point were in the same stage when we first time we heard about blockchain and what is it and what it can bring to us. Yeah, so I will quickly start with the session, and due to the bandwidth concern, I will turn off my camera and share my screen. Yeah. So it's Prashant, you're sharing it? Hello?
Yeah,
Am I
so
on?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sharing.
Okay. So, of course, as one of our participant already, expressed his interest. So let me just, begin with stating that what blockchain and a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is, right? So we had a major challenge in the initial stages of this technology, that people used to understand blockchain equals Bitcoin, Bitcoin equals blockchain, which is uh, a major fundamental error in understanding, right? So people, we all are interested, our interest level goes up each day when we see the 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 monetary value that we can gain from cryptocurrencies. But what underlies cryptocurrency is the technology, which is blockchain, that helps entire functionality. So we see how currencies like blockchain, Ethereum, even a Dogecoin, which was started as a joke, um, is actually increasing its value each day, and how people are getting more interested to gain the monetary output from it. But blockchain as a technology has more to do other than just the functionality of a digital currency. So cryptos are just one part of it, which just helps in financial transaction with the help of digital tokens, assets, however we call it. But blockchain as an underlying technology is applicable in major sectors, industries across the globe, including economies and functions of governments. So the session that we are focused on today is how blockchain will transform economy and make it more transparent. So it is ideally a journey that we are forcing towards transforming our life. So can we move on to the next slide? So, we have seen revolutions like social media, big data, artificial intelligence, etc., so on and so forth. We are seeing analytics, robotics, but the biggest among all, which people are super confused about, is blockchain. As I said, the notion of Bitcoin equals blockchain is the major challenge that is, adding to the hindrances towards getting the fundamentals of the underlying technology of cryptocurrency, which is blockchain. So every aspects of the emerging technology we look at, blockchain is the biggest one, which is going to transform each and everybody's life in the coming days. As you see how industries are bringing in robotics, how they're trying to manage data that we create each day, even unknowingly, the information transmitted through drones, the infrastructure we use to store our data on the cloud, um, with the notion that it will be safe there, which essentially is not. Um, how we use sensors to transmit data in real time, which is known as the Internet of Things, and of course the social web. All these has its own functions to look at, own advantages that to be leveraged. However, the backbone of all these transmission, transactions, storages is nothing but blockchain, right? So that will help in a safe storage and safe transactions of money or a digital asset, or even uh, you know other types of assets like your land records, your intellectual property, and so on and so forth. So what exactly is blockchain? Can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So, when we, on a daily basis, we exchange a lot of information through emails, informations on WhatsApp, uh, and various other platforms like the social media, right? We send pictures, we send documents, we send PDFs, we send, various other formats. But if you look at it, essentially what we're doing is we are sending the copy of the document to the concerned person, right? But the originals are staying with us. So, as Don Tapscott, you know, widely mentions, which is one of the favorite quote of mine, is when we want to send a digital asset, a digital money to another person, we have to ensure that the money reaches that person, right? So we cannot send a copy of the particular currency, for example, $100, and have the originals with us. So that doesn't make sense. So how do we do that safely without even knowing whom we are sending, without the need of a centralized institute? Is nothing but through blockchain technology. The internet, as you all must be knowing, is full of information, data, but that we get bombarded with every day. But how do we safe keep it? We need a blockchain, a technology like blockchain, which is actually the need of the hour, and that we were looking forward to. Next slide. Yeah. So as I mentioned, apart from the money as a currency part, we deal with a lot more of assets which are prone to be misused, prone to get hacked. And there are many such instances, especially in countries like, um, you know, Venezuela, Honduras, and even some of the developing nations in Southeast Asia, that records are actually getting altered, transmitted without even a blink of a, a, a notification that you know goes to the actual owner. So in that case, it's a huge amount of fraudulent activity that been encouraged by, of course, the players who are the miscreants. So how do we create that internet of value when we are actually looking through transacting digitally from point A to point B to, several other nodes across the globe? Intellectual property, your uh, creatives, like your arts, your musics, your songs, your books, your articles, that has its own creativity. Your in any sort of a land deeds, land titles, your carbon footprints, which is a major issue towards sustainability, a person's identity, for example, and so on and so forth. And one of the major thing, of course, is how we can transform democracy through how we participate in an electoral system. So all these are nothing but assets, right? It's assets does not just mean physical assets. No, these are all digital assets which has a value, a monetary value, which is huge amount. And companies, industries, local agencies are working day and night, investing millions just to protect and safeguard these digital assets. So that's where a blockchain technology will create that value, where things will be more smooth, decentralized, immutable, and without a doubt, the trust will exist in every transactions of any such assets. Can you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So just what I have just spoken about, I just want to give a quick demonstration. Perhaps we can make this a little bit of interactive here. That what you know, as we know that globally there's a billions of dollars get transferred from one corner to another corner, but can anybody just give their opinion on what, according to them, you all think is the biggest flow of funds that happens globally? You can just type it in the chat box if you wish to. Anybody? Any wild guesses? The biggest flow of funds that occurs? Of course,
think
data.
within a banks
Uh,
to banks.
yeah. So banks to banks. I mean to say, what is the biggest flow of funds with respect to the financial transaction that happens? The biggest one that happens globally.
Exchange markets.
Okay. Okay. I'll just quickly move on to that. So we normally try to guess it as, is it a corporate investments that happens? As you said, of course, dollar exchanges, um, any sort of a foreign help that moves from developed to the developing on the underdeveloped nations. But which we do not really know is, it doesn't come that transparent to us, is the biggest flow of funds that exists today is nothing but remittance, money remittance that we do from one country to another, right? Through MoneyGram, through Western Union, etc. So as of now, if I have to quote a data, it's around $600 billion per year. That's an approximate amount of fund movement that happens globally, right? So if we understand the mechanism of how these funds actually moves, is if I am you know being posted in one of the, perhaps in somewhere in Ohio, and I want to send some money on a monthly basis to one of my family members based out of, I say India or Philippines or Malaysia or Poland, somewhere. So if I am using a platform like a Western Union or a MoneyGram, first of all, the minimum amount of charges that we pay per transaction is 10% of the total remittance, which is quite a huge amount. Second is the time frame. So it takes around 30 to 40 days approximately for the remittance to happen. Of course, there is a money transaction limits in the sense as with respect to the volume, but that's kind of an average. Sometimes it does take less time if it is the proximity of the nations, but that's the average count that we use. But we need a system that will transform us, our society, and how we do money transactions, right? It'll take less time so that it reaches my family member within minutes, perhaps seconds. Or it should take lesser charge for me to send the money. so that I can also if I'm sending $100, my family members should get at least $95 in conversion, and not a real 10% cut on that. So there are lots of innovations that startups are coming with. One of such startups is a application called Abra. It's based out of Philippines. So what they've really done is they have used blockchain as a technology, and they have decentralized the participants so well that everything is transparent from the sender to the receiver and the middleman with respect to how much money is being sent, what is the percentage cut when the money is received, and everything is noted, recorded in the digital ledger, which is easily auditable by any regulators. And that's what we call a transformation, where through the app of Abra, if someone is sending a money to Philippines, for example, $100, the charges is just 2%, and the money reaches in 4 to 5 minutes. And that's the max. How it happens? I link the Abra app to my bank account. I say 31st, 30th of the month. I say transfer $100 to one of my family member based in Manila. They get a notification on their Abra app. They select who is the nearest teller available, like we use how taxi aggregators, food delivery aggregators, and such platforms. And the nearest teller comes, gives the money in cash to the receiver in the local currency, and takes the 2% that goes to the platform of Abra, from which they get a commission. What happens? As a customer, I pay less. As a receiver, I get the money within minutes. I don't have to wait for days and weeks. So everything becomes so smooth, so transparent, and I don't have to worry about any theft either. So that is what we call a real transformation through technology like blockchain that we're looking at, right? Now, if you can move to the next slide, please. Yes. So blockchain, we have seen what internet was. Now blockchain would be the second era of internet that will create a digital value for us. Next slide, please. Yeah. So how a blockchain gets created. So we have understood some of the fundamentals of why blockchain is important, or what it can do to help us transform ourselves. Now let us get into a little bit of more, the technicality, that how exactly a blockchain would get created. So by the word blockchain, what we understand, block and chain, if we just divide this in two parts. So it's a chain of blocks that gets created when a new transaction, a new information, or an asset gets created. So when I say chain of information, what do I mean? Now, if, for example, I stay in a small village and I go to a local supermarket to buy my daily essentials, right? So I go home and I maintain a note, or rather I stick it on the wall, that on 1st of August 2021, I bought 1, 2, 3, 4 items. On 2nd of August, I bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items, and so on until the 31st of August. And that's how, at the end of the month, I want to understand what my expenditures are, how I can budget better. Now, if someone comes and just erase one point, or adds one point, or just scribble something on top of it, so it becomes really not possible to read through it, so I lose data. My understanding, what my purpose, gets really not met. But when it happens with a transaction, when we look at millions of dollars from one part to another, That's a huge, huge loss, right? So what we can do, we create the same ledgers, what I just gave an example of, that what I'm buying every day from a supermarket. What I do is I keep a lamination on top of it and stick the same way it is and give a serial number to it, but it is laminated. Neither nobody can add, neither can it be erased, neither can it be scrabbled, right? And the serial number on each of those notes will help me understand before this note which was the one, right? Even if we don't enter the particular date we have given. So this is just a hypothetical demonstration. So in similar function, when we say blockchain, a block of information is created and a second block of information gets created again when a new addition or a new alteration happens. So an addition or alteration doesn't happen in the same block. It happens on a following block, so that each block remains unique. And each block, when it gets created, it has something called a hash, which is nothing like a digital stamp, a seal on each block, so that we understand, okay, so this hash is actually connected to the previous block hash. So previous block hash and the following block hash would be the same. And the following block hash would be another one which will be same as the previous one. So every block will have two hashes, one of its own and one of the previous one. So if any hackers try to get in, try to do some nuisance out there, he has to change each of the hash in every block of the chain, which is humanly impossible to do. Why? Because each blocks gets created and decentralized among all the participants. By participants, what I mean, for example, if there is for example, a policyholder of a car insurance, he is one participant. Now, in that particular insurance policy, if there has to be a blockchain created, he is one of the participant. Another participant will be his insurance agent or a broker. Another participant will be the insurance company who provides the insurance. Another company may be the participant may be the regulator, or if there's another insurance company providing a portion of the coverage, if it is the policy amount or the coverage risk is higher, can be another participants. So all these would be participants, will have each nodes which are nothing but a computer network of their own, connected through blockchain, which and has a decentralized information about the policyholder on each of the nodes. So any sort of hacking or alteration of data that any hackers try to do, each of the participants will get a notification immediately. And in order to make any fraudulent activity happen, each of the hash needs to get changed simultaneously and individually, which is impossible to do. So as a result, what happens is it is immutable. It cannot be changed. Any kind of a theft alert, any sort of outside external involvement that tries to jump in, every participants will get notified, meaning they will be alerted as soon as it happens. So there's no way that any of the participants try to even alter any data to perhaps get a, a claim amount back for an illegitimate claim that has been put forward to an insurance company, which is a very common globally. So that's what a blockchain network will do, and that's how a blockchain will get created when a transaction happens. Now, who creates this blockchain? Can we move on to the next slide? Now, as I already explained about the hash and the digital stamp and etc., the blockchain is created by users called miners. Now, these miners are continuously coding within a blockchain network, which is perhaps either a private or a consortium or a public. And each request comes in and they code, and they code, and they create the block. And after every block gets created successfully, these miners gets a paycheck or incentivized through digital assets like cryptocurrency. Now that's what would be their salary for mining. So this is the basic fundamentals of who creates it, why it's get created, and how it's get created. We can move on to the next slide. Yeah. So why do we need blockchain now? And the next slide. So we have spoken about all the various benefits and ways blockchain can help us. So blockchain here essentially is the answer. But what's the question? Why do we need a blockchain? Do everybody need a blockchain? The answer is no. A blockchain will only be needed when there is a concern over safety, when there's a concern of data management, when there's a concern of how we can make any traditional way of functioning better and through digital ways, which has a high risk of theft or cyber attacks. Now, every industry now is looking at a possibility of blockchain application, but 20% of them may not need a blockchain as of now. Perhaps maybe for the scale of the business, the need of the hour, or their customer requirements, whatever it may be. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we have discussed all these possible ways. Now, one of the most important part that I want to come across is 7 transformation of a prosperous world. This will give a view on how blockchain will actually help us transform our everyday life, right? So the first transformation that we are looking at is protecting our rights through immutable records. So every solution that we bring in is because we see a problem. And if there's a problem, we try to find a solution for it. And protecting rights is a fundamental issue that every citizen across the globe faces in some or the other ways. For example, I've already mentioned about the land titles and records. So in places like Honduras, for example, as per the legal constitution, a person can have a record, if I can guess that right, or rather recall it right, it's around 10 years or so, post which there's a renewal process. And it can also be changed after the years without the actual owner being, known about it. And those places, as we know, it's not, there There's, of course, lots of civil rights violations and how we can manage one's assets in such cases. So every individual's records of physical assets can be recorded and noted in ledgers, digital ledgers, which are nothing but the blockchain, the blockchain nodes, the blocks that it's created. So through my demonstrations earlier, it is unchangeable. No one can, you know, alter with any such data. The owner remains uh, happy, satisfied, no risk of his title getting transferred or being mishandled and etc. With just one technology, there's a trust among the participant, the regulators, the landowners, and any other participants, like if the land is on lease to some third parties. So such huge amount of transformation towards a prosperous world we can look at through documenting our physical assets on a network like blockchain. Second, if we look at, is creating a true sharing economy. Now we all talk about sharing economy, right? We see platforms like Uber, Grab, Airbnb. These are essentially known to be a contributor to a sharing economy, but the truth is they are not. They are just aggregators, and they are certainly a centralized network, which is an opposite of what blockchain would promise, right? So what Airbnb, for example, or even Uber or Grab, if you look at, so the centralized application for booking your cabs or booking your accommodations remains with one platform, right? And they just aggregate the service with various owners as the requests, the customer requests pops in. So if we think of a platform where every participants, including the house owners or the cab owners who are giving their vehicle for transportation or giving their spare spaces for accommodation, everybody becomes a participant in a decentralized network, right? And they quote their own prices, and as a customer, I also become a participant on that blockchain network and just bid to get in and book my space or book my taxi service right there, and all participants knows if what's the status, what the progress, and what's going on, instead of anything uh, to be intimated to the provider at a later stage if there's a complaint to make, if the service wasn't good, if the price was high, and so on and so forth. Now that is what is called as a truly sharing economy. Now, the money is also distributed among the participants and not just a central authority who controls it. Now, as I spoke about the MoneyGram, the Western Union example, so that's what we say how we can use blockchain to stop the ripoffs that customers faces through remitting money through such institutes on a daily basis. The fourth point is protecting our privacy. Now, this is the major thing that we're looking at, and there are plenty of platforms that has come up that host their services on a blockchain network to support individual identities, right? To support our data, our digital assets, so that we can protect what we have. Now, if you look at, we create data on a daily basis, and at times we don't even know what we create, and the virtual us would know more than what we know about ourselves. So that is a real risk to an individual's identity. And how do we protect that? There's so many instances coming up where companies, in the digital space uses our data to broaden their services, to use they use our data without even notifying us. So you never know what may happen in the future. So which is a real risk factor for any individuals. Our privacy is hampered every day, every second. So a network like blockchain again will help us provide that privacy. They'll help us protect data because it is transparent through a decentralized framework and immutable because it has its own digital stamp on it so that no one can actually tamper with any data, right? Privacy is the foundation of a free society, as per again, one of my favorite authors in blockchain is Don Tapscott. Now, let's moving to the fifth point, ensuring compensation for creating value. Now, if you look at the 90s, 80s, songwriters, musicians, even artists, everyone's creative work, be it a music composition, a song, or even a painting done, those were being valued, auctioned at different platforms, which is completely physical. But at present, if you put it online, there's a huge difference in the compensation that the original creators that get, because a lot of middleman that comes in, a lot of lobbying that happens, a lot of marketing expenses that goes in, and so on and so forth. Now think of a situation where such assets like a painting or a music is there stored in a digital platform, marketed through a digital platform, valued on that digital platform, and sold and bought on the same platform, which is again a transparent network among all the participants. In that way, what happens? The compensation of the original creator remains high. Why? Because the transactions, the buying and selling of the creative asset happens on the same platform where both participants are present. It happens on through digital tokens like cryptocurrencies, and it directly reaches the creator's bank. There's no middleman involved there. No lobbying happens there. Now, that is the level of transformation that we look at. We have heard about a lot in recent days, the buzz on non-fungible tokens, marketplaces like OpenSea that's coming up, that where we can put in our digital assets for sale. Now that is an ultimate example of how we can create prosperity through a blockchain application, where creators gets fair compensation, there's no unnecessary middleman involved, buyers get a fair price to buy what they need to. Now, the sixth point and the seventh point, the Halcyon age of entrepreneurship and how blockchain can transform governance and democracy. Now, I'll move on to the next slides to actually demonstrate on these 2 points. Now, we have explored the blockchain fundamentals and what it is. Now, let us move on to what exactly some of the real cases would look like. Now, due to the interest of time, I will give you a brief on each. First, we'll look at fintech. Now, if you move on the next slide, please. So, financial technology, that's what we call as fintech. Now, if you look at the left-hand side picture, that's called, you all may have come up at some point, whether you're in school or whether you are a cartoon fan. So we know what sort of a complexity we look at when we look at such, Goldberg machine, Goldberg machines that cartoonists used to use to perhaps a simple work to be done through a complex process. Now this is the current financial system that we live in. We go to a bank, we use an ATM, we you know what do you say we use overdraft facilities, but what happens? Banks earns around more than $6 billion perhaps from just ATM functions and overdrafts. And who bears the cost through service charges, which is at times are hidden, is the customers. For the services that we use, queuing up in the bank, and situations like today's what we are facing of severe lockdowns across the globe, if current system has to exist, the we can imagine the level of difficulties that a customer can face in simple banking transactions. But of course, we have moved ahead, and we will move ahead even faster now through the help of technologies like blockchain, where we can transact within minutes, and that is safe, trusted, and can never be attacked through any cyber criminals. Now, such system in a fingerprint, whether we want to do a small transaction in a supermarket or we want to approve bigger transactions in purchasing real estates or any business functions, purchases from vendor to vendor from one part of the world to another part of the world, where you also have a significant currency exchange values that's being charged for the transaction. So these happens in minutes, and which is safe. What else do we need? That's the need of the hour, and that's what would happen in the coming days, even more faster. Next slide, please. Yeah. Now, what I explained on the fintech part, the 7 point, the 6 point on the Halcyon age of the entrepreneurs is, I think, as we live in an age of transformation, information, the various startups that's coming up all over the globe are very much tech savvy. They're innovation oriented, and technologies like blockchains are actually helping them, thrive, gain that success, the momentum in business in perhaps a year, which otherwise would have taken more than 3-4 years to even reach their break even. Why? Because they have services on their fingerprint, they have regulatory requirements done on their fingerprint. I mean, on their devices that they have, just a click of a button. No need to physically step into any regulator's office, and of course, servicing the customers, adding value to what they offer through any emerging technologies like blockchain and others. This is kind of a music to any entrepreneur's ears, and that's what is happening. Of course, there are many other challenges like funding and not being able to scale up. Those are non-technical issues, but technologically, everybody's on a faster pace of innovation as compared to 10 years back. Now, the last point, how it can actually help us understand and transform democracy, is nothing but our primary fundamental right is to participate in an electoral system. Now, if we move on to the next slide, the current electoral system looks somewhat like this. There's a lot of nonsense that goes around, and we are asked to believe what happens. We are asked to portray our perceptions on that. We not necessarily can have our decisions being put forward to make the right choices. But that's how it is. What can a blockchain do then? If through a voting machine, or even in many parts of the world, there are a paper-based voting that happens, we give our choices and we come out of the election, but we do not know whether my decision for a leader is actually being counted or not. We just assume and move on. If there's something happens not in our favor, we just are disappointed, we blame, we think of lots of possibilities that may have happened, but the real crux of the matter nobody will come to know other than just trusting a central authority to conduct such elections. Now, having a blockchain system in place, I would make a decision to vote for a leader. I would know my voting was done. I would know my voting was counted for that leader, and I would know how it has impacted the election outcome. So everything remains transparent, and most importantly, every leaders or a politicians gets accountable to every citizens of the nation. Now that's what we call the real move towards a fabulous prosperity. A technology just created to facilitate a digital transaction on digital through digital tokens like bitcoins can do numerous other aspects that we can't even think of. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick thing. Um, Again, thanks to Stepladder for organizing this. And since we all are interested in learning what exactly it is, there's a lot of exciting things happening at Stepladder. So you can just log into your website, find it yourself, whether you want to learn blockchain or any other courses of your choice. And since you're part of this session already, the the team members of Stepladder is kind enough to provide you a discount of 10% for your next course. Any question, you can just get in touch with the team. Next slide, please. Now let's move on to a quick case studies on a real important trends that's happening across the globe. First is insurance, and the second is space exploration. Now, a fair amount of demonstration we had on what blockchain as a technology can help us with. Now, insurance, briefly, I have touched upon through the automotive example on how a blockchain can help reduce frauds in insurance. Now, I'll just quickly move on to a very emerging area that's being explored globally is how we can use space economy to help people on earth, how we can use space for the next generation developments. So there are various possibilities. Elon Musk is trying to put more than 1,000 satellites on the low orbit. Why? To provide internet connectivity. But is that connectivity only for people who are residing on Earth? The answer is no. It's also for people who are going on the outer space. They can also use internet connection. And for a blockchain to function, a internet connectivity is the basic fundamental, right? So now if I have to link with insurance and space, let us think of how institutes or organizations like NASA, ISRO, or even European Space Organizations launch their spacecrafts or rockets, or even how Elon Musk is trying to you know, send his contribute to his space journey through various spacecrafts. So each of these spacecrafts or rockets send or satellites that's there on, lower and upper orbits are cost intensive. They are huge capital that's needed to, first of all, make them, then send them, and now the next phase is to get them back for reuse. Now, any objects that is highly risk, that has high risk on them, has to be insured, either as a regulatory norm or as per to protect on, the capital invested. No, now if NASA sends a rocket or sends an orbital instrument out there in the outer space, what's the guarantee that it is going to be successfully launched? It's not. It's everything works on a guesswork. If it doesn't, who's going to bear the cost of the loss? The company invested. If it is NASA, then government spending. Government spending means taxpayers' money. Now, if they have to actually try to insure some $1 billion of launch, then which insurance company is that big enough to take that entire risk? Now, if because those risks are highly, or rather likely to happen, and if an insurance company has to insure an entire launch, then it's most likely they're going to get bankrupt by paying off the policy amount. Or how the damage happens out in the space, we will not even be able to understand. So an investigation post damage is just out of the question. Now, if we have connectivity out in the space, if we have a blockchain network deployed there, and if a launch is being insured and all participants, like for example NASA, an insurance company, and any other middlemen involved like the government regulators and agencies, would be knowing what happens from the start of the launch till the end, right? So as I said, a single insurance company will never insure a launch. So what happens ideally is $100, or for example, $100 of insurance will get covered by 2 to 3 insurance companies together, or a reinsurer, like for example, Swiss Re, Hanover Re, and so on and so forth, or someone from Lloyd's. Now, to investigate a damage post it occurs, it becomes more easier because the information flow is real time starting from the launch, and it gets recorded on digital ledgers on blockchain, which cannot be changed, altered, and there's a trust which is already exists among all the participants. So the loss amount, the real reason of the damage, with whether it is actually being covered in the policy or not, becomes much more easier, and hence an insurance company will be much more comfortable in covering any risk for any amount of launch that happens. So business becomes easy, innovations becomes more promising, and the future looks more bright. And that's what a, a blockchain technology can even further help us achieve. Now, if we move on to the next slide, we are increasingly bombarded with informations on how countries like Venezuela, Afghanistan, Syria, you know, being devastated, how people are seeking asylum in outside world. Now, it's a very sad, a very heartbreaking incidents that happens, but sadly, we don't have control over it. Now, if we look at the current example of Afghanistan, or even a couple of months back, what is happening in Venezuela, what happens to those who actually get asylum to a developed nation? Does their problem ends there? Do they become prosperous automatically? They get the asylum. Do they get access to every resources they need? It's a big no. Rather, the problem starts then, even more when they get the asylum. How do they survive? How will they get treated? Will they get the same dignity they deserve? Was their livelihood? Was their savings? How they want to grow if someone wants to, contribute to the economy? It's all a big question mark. Will they be able to take a loan in 5 years down the line in the same country if they want to do something of their own or build a house of their own? They just get a subsidy amount from the government so that they can survive for a couple of years. And the subsidy amount reduces each year until they get their permanent, residence permit. Now, there's one country who's actually nailing it is Finland. Now, what happens is what Finland is doing different than other people, other countries who are not giving, who are also providing such asylums. Finland has developed their blockchain network. On what? Now, if an asylum seeker comes to Finland, now if they want to borrow money from a financial institution, how will a financial institution give them the money? They do not have a security. They do not know their history of the loan seeker, their credit scores, nothing. So what happens? From the day the person lands in Finland, their registration is stored in a blockchain network, and it gets recorded from day one till the time, he or she is present in the country. So what subsidized amount, what benefits that person is getting from the government is there in the network. How the person's behavioral traits are, what the local authorities or the policing agencies are noting about that person, whether they have any criminal intent or whether they are surviving as normal civilians, and lot more. So such historic informations that gets stored in digital ledgers which cannot be changed or altered is mind-blowing thing when it comes that a person gets their residences permit and down the line they want to build their own business, for example, they want to buy own property or whatever it is that will contribute to the economy. And that's what the government wants, that slowly they start contributing to the economy. And such facilities through our digital network will help all the participants understand whether if for example, a loan to be given to an asylum seeker a couple of years after, or how that person should be treated further to live in the country or not. All these gets so well decentralized in the network that everyone knows the further steps, and that's how an economy gets more prosperous. And that's what Finland is doing, and making not just their economy and citizens happier, but also the asylum seeker much more, what do you say, of course, much more prosperous, much more developed, much more transformed, and more, willingness that develops towards the country. And not that they are being treated as a third world citizen. So the unimaginable opportunity that lies with blockchain technology is just beyond anybody's imagination. Next slide, please. Yep, move ahead. So this is we already spoken about. And next slide. And this is what we just spoke on how blockchain would do, and through their own ledgers, which are nothing but the smart contracts. And why Ethereum is, because Ethereum is the most powerful blockchain network that would actually help such transformations happen. And Finland is using just that to help asylum seekers contribute to the economy as soon as they can. Next slide. Yeah, again, just go ahead. If you like what you heard, if you liked what you learned, please do subscribe, like, follow Career Stepladder on their social network. And don't forget to take the opportunity of using the 10% discount that the um, team members of Career Stepladder is providing to you guys. And with this, we come to the conclusion. And next slide. Thank you very much. And hopefully you have learned something today and would love to hear back.